The whispers began before the bride reached the end of the white aisle. They moved through the rows of pale wooden chairs in little bursts, stopping whenever someone turned around and starting again as soon as the music covered them. I stood near the edge of the lawn in a navy suit, turning a heavy, unlit silver monogrammed lighter over and over in my right hand. The metal was cool against my palm. I never opened it during a job. I did not smoke, and I had no romantic attachment to the lighter itself. My grandfather had given it to me when I was 19, along with one piece of advice. A room tells you what it wants before anyone says it aloud. The lawn wanted a distraction. Camille Thomas stood 3 rows from the front, beside her sister's closest friends. She wore a light blue floral dress with a high, clean neckline and a narrow belt at the waist. The coastal breeze moved a loose strand of her blonde hair across her cheek. She tucked it back without looking down. A woman in pearls leaned toward her and murmured behind one manicured hand. Camille's fingers closed around the small silver clasp of her evening bag. Once, twice, a third time. I had seen that movement the night before. It appeared whenever she was holding an answer in place with both hands. She lifted her eyes and found me across the aisle. For 1 second, the guests, the flowers, and the ocean beyond the lawn fell out of focus. Camille did not look frightened. She looked as if she had measured the room and decided it was not large enough to make her disappear. I placed the lighter flat against my palm and stopped turning it. That should have been my first warning. You don't fight a wave, you steer the ship. When a crowd begins carrying a story, you do not chase every voice. You find the current underneath them and choose where to direct it. Less than 24 hours earlier, Camille had entered my office with rain on the shoulders of her wool coat and a printed financial ledger inside a clear plastic sleeve. It had been Friday night, 11:30. My staff had gone home. The city below my windows was blurred by rain, and the last elevator had already made its descent when the receptionist called to say a visitor was waiting downstairs. I told her the office was closed, the receptionist said. She asked me to give you her name. Who is she? Camille Thomas? That name meant something in my world. Senior partner at Thomas Atelier, one of the most respected architectural firms on the West Coast. Her firm had designed museums, hospitals, and public buildings that made people pause before walking through the doors. Camille had built the partnership after her former mentor retired, then spent years making sure every contract, payroll record, and client promise survived the weight of its own success. I unlocked the door. She stepped inside carrying a leather tote and a calm expression that looked carefully assembled. The rain had darkened the wool at her shoulders. A citrus scent followed her into the room, clean and restrained. I apologize for the hour, she said. You would not be here at this hour if an apology solved the problem. The corner of her mouth moved, almost a smile. You are Adrian Foster. Crisis PR. I know. Then you also know I do not promise miracles. That is why I came. She placed the plastic sleeve on my desk. Inside was a financial ledger showing a fabricated deficit large enough to threaten the firm's cash reserves. A page of handwritten notes claimed Camille had redirected client funds into a private real estate venture. A screenshot from an industry blog showed the ledger beside a headline accusing her of embezzlement. The post had been published 40 minutes earlier. The board votes Monday morning, she said. If this story survives the weekend, they remove me before I can present the actual accounts. I did not touch the sleeve. Who has access to the original ledger? Our finance team, external auditors, board counsel, 2 senior partners, and the firm's secure document administrator. Who knew the board would meet Monday? Everyone who received the calendar invitation? Who knew the location of the wedding? Her fingers closed over the leather handle of her tote. The board members attending my sister's wedding. Several clients. My sister's future in-laws. The people who enjoy learning bad news before the facts arrive. And you came here because you believe the document is forged. I know it is forged. How? The real ledger has a reconciliation entry that was approved on Tuesday. The copy online shows a deficit inserted after that entry. The numbers do not connect. Whoever altered it understood enough accounting to make the page look convincing, but not enough to preserve the audit trail. She spoke without rushing. Her voice stayed level, but the corner of the plastic sleeve bent beneath her thumb. I opened a fresh notebook. I can help with the public response and the order of operations. I cannot authenticate the file myself. We need e-discovery counsel, a forensic document examiner, preservation notices, and a controlled review of the server logs. I already called our general counsel. He told me to stay away from reporters and attend the wedding as if nothing happened. That advice is not wrong. It is incomplete. What is the complete version? I slid the sleeve back toward her. We protect your legal position first. We preserve every original. We do not accuse anyone without a chain of custody. We do not let the board confuse silence with guilt, and we do not allow the wedding to become a public trial. She looked through the rain-streaked window. The wedding is tomorrow. Then we have a 48-hour window. You make that sound manageable. Manageable is not the same as easy. She looked back at me. Can you come with me? As your PR advisor? As someone who can keep the room from deciding my future before I speak. That sentence carried more weight than the retainer proposal her assistant had emailed 10 minutes earlier. I can attend, I said. But we write down the boundaries before we leave this office. I am not pretending to be your partner in private. I am not touching you to create a photograph. I will not answer questions meant for you unless you ask me to. We can present a professional event arrangement. I am there as your crisis advisor and guest. People will assume we are together. People assume what helps their version of the room. We control what we confirm. She studied me. And if I change my mind tomorrow? You tell me, and the arrangement ends. I will still help you preserve the evidence. The tension in her hand eased. Write it down. We wrote it down. She signed the short engagement letter, then added a note in the margin. No physical contact without a clear signal from me. I signed beneath it. When she left, the heavy silver lighter sat beside my notebook. I turned it once, then closed the drawer and called Daniel Ruiz, an e-discovery attorney who had represented my firm during a crisis 3 years earlier. Daniel answered on the fourth ring. Tell me you are not calling with a client problem that begins with the words "wedding tomorrow." It begins with a forged financial ledger and a board vote Monday. That is worse. I thought you appreciated variety. Send me a copy through a secure channel. Do not forward the blog link to anyone else. By midnight, Daniel had arranged a morning call with a forensic document examiner named Nora Patel. Camille had sent the original accounting export to her general counsel, who issued a preservation hold covering the firm's document system, email accounts, access logs, and backup records. No one would delete, rename, overwrite, or privately inspect the relevant files without recording the action. At 7 the next morning, Nora joined the call from a quiet office in San Diego. She did not promise to identify the forger. She explained what she could establish. We need the original export, the online copy, the file hashes, the access history, and the system clock records, she said. The visible numbers are only one layer. We need to know which file existed first, which account opened it, whether the file was copied, and whether the document was altered before or after it left the system. Camille sat at my conference table with a cup of coffee between both hands. She had changed into a cream blouse and dark trousers for the drive to the coast. Her hair was still damp at the ends. What happens if we find a name? She asked. A name is not proof, Nora replied. An account record is not proof by itself either. We build a sequence and preserve the source of every record. Camille looked at me. That is the answer you wanted, I said. No, she said. It is the answer I can use. We drove separately to the coastal estate. Camille's sister, Elena, was marrying into the Sterling family, and the reception property sat on a bluff above the Pacific. White tents stretched across the lawn. Rose arches framed the ceremony aisle. Caterers moved between the kitchen and bar with trays of fruit, glassware, and tiny pastries. The beauty of the place made the rumor more dangerous. It was difficult to look frightened in a room designed to make every guest appear successful. Camille met me near the entrance. Her expression was controlled, but her gaze moved immediately to the people holding phones. "Daniel's in the library with Nora," I told her. "The estate manager gave us a private room and a secure network connection. Nothing will be discussed near the guests." "Did you sleep?" "For 40 minutes? That explains the tie." I looked down. "What is wrong with it?" "It is trying to become a pocket square." I straightened it. "It is an ambitious tie." She laughed softly. A few guests turned at the sound, and one of them lifted a phone. "There," I said. "That is the first useful image of the day." "You are using my laugh for public relations?" "Only with permission." She gave me a sideways glance. "You are learning." Before the ceremony began, I asked, "Do you want me beside you during the aisle entrance, or would you rather walk alone?" "Beside me," she said. "Not in front." "Understood." We took our places near the back of the chairs. The whispers started a few minutes later. A woman in pearls leaned toward Camille and mentioned the blog post without using her name. Camille's fingers closed around the clasp of her evening bag. I did not interrupt. I waited until she looked at me. "Do you want me to redirect her?" I asked quietly. "Not yet." "All right." She turned toward the aisle as the music changed. The ceremony continued, but the guests watched Camille more than they watched the bride. The people who had read the blog post were waiting for a reaction. The people who had not read it were waiting to learn whether the people beside them looked concerned. I kept one hand around the silver lighter in my pocket. The monogram pressed against my fingers each time I closed them. When the vows ended, the guests moved toward the reception lawn. I walked beside Camille without touching her. "6 people are checking their phones and looking directly at you," I murmured. "That is not a comforting count." "It is a measurable one." "You make a terrible friend." "I make an excellent seating chart." At the cocktail bar, Marcus intercepted us. He was a junior board member at Camille's firm, handsome in the polished way of someone who had never been forced to choose between appearing confident and being correct. His slate suit fit perfectly. His smile did not. "Camille," he said, "I was surprised you came." "My sister's getting married," she replied. "Of course. I only meant that you must have a great deal to handle." His gaze shifted toward me. "I suppose you found help." I waited. Camille's shoulders stayed square. "Do you want me to answer?" I asked her. She looked at Marcus. "No, I have it." Marcus smiled as if he had won something. "The board has questions." "Then the board can read the response our counsel sends," Camille said. "That sounds defensive." "It sounds documented." His expression changed by a fraction. I stepped beside Camille, not between them. "Marcus, I do not believe we have met Adrian Foster." "I know who you are." "Then you know I dislike answering a question twice. Camille has already said the board will receive a documented response." Marcus's eyes moved to the lighter-shaped outline in my pocket, then back to my face. "You are treating this like a campaign." "No," I said. "A campaign can survive a bad headline. A legal record has to survive review." He left without offering another answer. Camille watched him go. "You were almost polite." "I was extremely polite." "That is what worries me." The bartender approached. I remembered the detail from the night before. "Sparkling water with lime, no ice," I said. "Coffee for me if the kitchen has it." Camille looked at me. "You remembered? You pushed away the coffee in my office and asked for water. You were watching. It is part of my work." "And outside your work?" The bartender placed the glass in front of her. A thin slice of lime rested against the rim. I held the coffee cup between both hands. "I am still collecting evidence," I said. "Of what?" "Whether you ever stop asking difficult questions." She took a sip of water. "The evidence is not looking good." Our phones vibrated at the same time. Daniel had sent a secure message. Nora had finished the first review of the original ledger and the online copy. The forged file was not a simple alteration of the original. It had been rebuilt from 2 different exports. Someone had copied the real Q3 projections, inserted a false deficit, and preserved enough of the original formatting to make the pages appear authentic. More importantly, the access record showed that the real files had been opened from a dormant guest account on Tuesday night. The account belonged to the wedding estate's temporary network, not Camille's firm. "That does not identify a person," I said. "No," Daniel wrote, "but the account was activated using a guest code issued to a member of the Sterling wedding party. We need the estate's access records and camera footage. Do not confront anyone yet." Camille read the message twice. "Who had the code?" she asked. "Daniel is requesting the list. Marcus was here last night for the rehearsal dinner. So were 100 other people. Helen was here too." Helen was the chief financial officer of Camille's biggest rival and the bride's future sister-in-law. She stood near the main house in a burgundy dress, speaking to 2 older men with a hand resting lightly on a champagne glass. Camille's thumb tapped the clasp of her bag. "Do you want me to ask Daniel to include Helen and Marcus in the preservation request?" I asked. "Yes, but do not name them as suspects. Name the accounts, devices, and time period." That was the first moment I understood why Camille had built a firm people trusted. She did not need to be pushed toward restraint. She knew the difference between suspicion and proof. We moved to the estate library. Daniel joined us by secure video, and Nora walked us through the evidence already preserved. The room smelled of old paper, lemon polish, and the faint salt carried in from the open windows. Camille sat at the desk. I placed a fresh cup of coffee beside her. "You did not ask what I wanted," she said. "You have been drinking it black since 11:30 last night." "That is a dangerous amount of attention." "It is a small amount of attention. The dangerous part is the lighter." I set the heavy silver lighter beside the coffee. The monogram caught the afternoon sun. For the next hour, we worked through the preserved records. Nora compared file hashes. Daniel created a custody log. Camille authenticated the accounting entries and identified which numbers belonged to which project. I built a communication sequence showing when the rumor appeared, when the board members received it, and when Marcus first mentioned the allegation in a private message. We did not have a name yet. We had a door, a key code, a time window, and several people who had reasons to walk through it. At 4, the estate manager provided the access list. The temporary guest code had been issued to Marcus for the rehearsal dinner. Helen had entered the library with him shortly after 10 that night. The security camera showed them walking toward the room, but the view ended at the corridor because the library itself was private. Marcus's attorney responded to Daniel's preservation request within 20 minutes. Marcus denied accessing any confidential information. Helen's firm sent no response. "It still does not prove the leak," Nora said. "The code may have been shared. The camera only places them near the room. We need the device logs in the original transfer path." Camille looked at the ocean through the library window. "The board votes Monday. If we wait for a perfect answer, I lose the weekend." "You do not need a perfect answer to protect yourself," Daniel said. "You need a verified interim record, a sworn statement, and a board counsel who understands the evidence is developing. Can we prepare that tonight?" "Yes." She turned to me. "Adrian, what is the public strategy?" "We do not stage a confession. We do not create a scene. We allow the wedding to remain a wedding while your counsel sends the board a factual update. If someone tries to corner you publicly, you decide whether to answer." "And if I decide to answer?" "I stand where you tell me to stand." "Not beside the microphone?" "Only if you ask." She nodded. "Good." We returned to the lawn at sunset. String lights came on above the tables. The band began a slower set, and servers carried small plates between the guests. Camille ate half a piece of bread while reading Daniel's draft statement. "You need food," I said. "I am reading." "You can read and eat." "That sounds like an architectural problem." "It is a structural requirement." She took the plate. You've been waiting all day to say that. I have a limited range. I noticed. The relief lasted 6 minutes. Then Camille's phone vibrated again. The anonymous blog had published a second document. It was a private message Camille had sent a year earlier during a delayed hospital project. The message said, "We need to keep this quiet until we know the full cost." The blogger presented it as proof that Camille had hidden losses from clients. Around us, guests began looking at their phones. The band continued playing, but the lawn had changed. Conversations broke apart whenever Camille approached. She read the message with her face turned toward the darkening ocean. Her fingers tightened around the phone. That message was about a construction delay, she said. The hospital board had not been notified because the engineer had not completed the inspection. Do you have the full thread? In the firm archive? Daniel can preserve it. The board will not wait for the full thread. Do you want me to redirect the guests? She looked at me. Not yet. Helen approached before we could move. Marcus followed several steps behind her. Camille, Helen said loudly, I just saw the new post. I'm so sorry. This must be devastating. Camille placed the phone face down on the table. Helen's sympathy had a sharp edge. You should think about leaving before this becomes more embarrassing. I looked at Camille. Do you want me to step in? Her eyes met mine. The answer took one quiet second. Stand beside me, she said. Do not take the microphone. If I ask for help, I will ask. I stepped to her left, leaving her a clear path forward. Helen smiled at the guests gathering around them. That is a responsible choice. Your board members are here, after all. Camille turned to the small circle. Then it is useful that they are here to hear the same facts our counsel is sending them. Helen's smile tightened. Facts? Yes. Camille reached into her tote and removed a thin document folder. The original message thread, the inspection report, and the hospital engineer's dated notice. The message you published omits the page that explains why the project delay was not yet announced. Helen glanced at Marcus. He looked down at his glass. Camille continued. The ledger posted this morning is also being reviewed. Our forensic examiner has preserved the original export, the online copy, and the access records. The court and board counsel will receive the chain of custody, not a cropped screenshot. The guests grew quiet. Helen lowered her voice. You are accusing me. No, I am telling you what has been preserved and what has not yet been proven. That answer took the pressure out of Helen's hands. She had expected anger, denial, or a public accusation she could call reckless. Camille had given her none of those. Marcus stepped forward. This is not the place for a corporate dispute. You are right, Camille said. That is why I am not deciding the dispute here. I am attending my sister's wedding. I will not leave because someone wants the guest to mistake a rumor for a ruling. She turned slightly toward me. Adrian, can you tell Daniel that I want the board update sent now? Yes. I made the call from several feet away. Daniel confirmed that the preservation notice, sworn statement, and verified exhibits were ready to send. Nora had also completed a preliminary comparison. The forged ledger's formatting came from the original export, but the altered values were introduced after the file left the firm's controlled system. That still did not identify who made the changes. It did establish that the person who accessed the file and the person who altered it might not be the same person. When I returned, Camille was still speaking to Helen. If you believe the documents are false, your counsel can challenge them through the proper channel. Camille said, If you believe I've committed a crime, report it to the proper authority. Do not turn my sister's wedding into a courtroom, because a crowd is easier to influence than a judge. Helen's face changed. The expression was not guilt exactly. It was calculation interrupted by a fact she could not use. She looked at Marcus again. That glance was not proof either, but it was a new piece of the pattern. Camille ended the conversation. I'm going to the gardens. Anyone who wants the documented update can receive it from board counsel. Anyone who wants gossip can find another table. She walked away without waiting for applause. I followed only after she looked back and nodded. The garden path led behind a row of tall hedges where the reception lights became soft gold between the leaves. The ocean was dark beyond the cliff. Somewhere near the fountain, water moved over stone in a steady, quiet rhythm. Camille stopped beside a white rose bush and pressed both hands against the edge of her tote. "I wanted to take the microphone," she said. "You chose not to." "I wanted to ask Helen how she could stand there and pretend to care." "You chose not to." "You are repeating yourself." "It is a useful habit." She looked at me. "You were angry." "Yes." "I saw it." I asked before acting. "You did." The silver lighter rested in my pocket. I took it out and turned it once. The monogram caught the garden light. "My grandfather used to say a room tells you what it wants before anyone speaks," I said. "Tonight the room wanted a spectacle. You gave it a record instead." Camille's gaze dropped to the lighter. "Does it ever make a flame?" "It could." "Why don't you use it?" "I like having one thing that stays closed." "That sounds less like a professional habit." "It may be." The reception music drifted over the hedges. Someone laughed near the cake table. Camille's shoulders finally lowered. "Last night we met as strangers," she said. I looked at her. She smiled, and the guarded expression she had worn since entering my office softened into something private. "At the wedding, are you still pretending nothing happened?" The question was not an accusation. It was an invitation with room around it. I closed the lighter in my hand. "I am not pretending." "Good. Do you want me to say more?" "Not yet." "All right." She stepped closer, then stopped before the space between us disappeared. "You are very good at waiting for permission. You are very good at making the waiting difficult." Her smile deepened. "That may be my professional specialty." We stayed in the garden until Daniel called with an update. The board council had received the evidence packet and acknowledged the preservation hold. The board vote would proceed Monday, but no emergency removal decision would be made before Camille had a chance to present the verified records. The wedding continued. Camille returned to her sister. I stayed near the edge of the reception, answering only the questions she directed toward me. When a guest asked whether we were together, Camille looked at me first. "We are working together," she said. The guest smiled as if that answer contained a secret. It did, but not one she was entitled to receive. On Monday morning, Camille presented the evidence to the board, with Daniel and Nora present by secure connection. The access record showed that Marcus's temporary guest account had opened the original ledger at 10:17 p.m. on Friday. The estate's hallway camera placed him outside the library with Helen. A later review of Helen's corporate device, authorized through counsel and preserved under the legal hold, showed a copy of the file transferred to an external storage account associated with her firm. The evidence did not depend on a single timestamp. It rested on the sequence: the guest account, the copied ledger, the altered file, the blog upload, and the messages sent to the board. Marcus admitted that he had opened the file. He said Helen told him she needed to compare Camille's figures with a rival bid. Helen denied creating the false numbers, but the file history and transfer records placed the altered copy inside her firm's controlled workspace before it reached the blog. Camille did not ask the board to punish anyone before the investigation was complete. She asked them to preserve the records, retain independent counsel, and judge her leadership on verified accounts rather than a fabricated page. The board voted to keep her as senior partner while the investigation continued. Adrian's firm sent its final invoice 3 days later. Camille paid it without disputing a single line. Then she called me. "Your work is complete," she said. "It sounds ominous." "It is an administrative statement." "I am known to fear those." "I would like to have dinner." "As a client?" "As Camille." I looked at the silver lighter on my desk. "Would you like me to bring a strategy?" "Bring yourself. Leave the strategy at the office." The investigation continued for several weeks. Helen resigned from the rival firm after receiving a formal demand for preservation and an independent review. Marcus stepped down from the board committee while counsel examined his role. Neither event erased the damage, but neither was treated as a convenient public punishment. The records mattered more than the applause. 3 months after the wedding, the coastal air had turned cool. I sat in a quiet restaurant near my office with the silver lighter beside my hand and a client file closed in front of me. Camille arrived carrying a dark wool coat and a leather planner. She slid into the booth across from me and placed the planner on the table. "I am sorry I am late," she said. "The ethics committee meeting ran over." "How did it go?" "They asked me to chair the committee next year." "That sounds like something you should accept." I told them I would check my schedule. She opened the planner and turned it toward me. Several weekends in the coming year had been marked with my name, not a vague note, not a tentative question, dates, places, and small reminders written in her precise handwriting. "I thought you hated public assumptions," I said. "These are private plans. They are very organized." "I am an architect. And if I have a crisis, you can call Daniel." "That is a painful answer." "You can call Daniel first," she said. "Then you can call me." I looked at the open planner. She had created space rather than asking me to occupy whatever space remained. The silver lighter sat beside my hand. I picked it up, turned it once, and placed it back on the table without opening it. "You don't fight a wave," I said. "You steer the ship." Camille reached across the table and rested her hand over mine. "Where are we steering?" "Somewhere with coffee." "That is your most ambitious answer yet." "I am pacing myself." She laughed. This time I did not count who heard it. The lighter remained closed between us, a small silver reminder that restraint was not the absence of feeling. Sometimes it was the way feeling learned to arrive without taking over the room. The end. Core lesson. Truth becomes stronger when it is preserved carefully, spoken with courage and supported by people who respect your right to make your own decisions. Healthy love does not take the microphone away. It stands beside you until you are ready to use your own voice. Green flag. The clearest sign of healthy love is consent in the small moments, asking before stepping in, honoring a boundary, giving credit where it belongs, and creating real space for someone in your future instead of demanding access to it. Like and subscribe. If you enjoyed Adrian and Camille's story, please like, subscribe, and share it with someone who believes love is built through patience, honesty, and everyday choices. Would you trust someone who helped you face a crisis without taking control away from you?